Welcome, everyone. Let's jump right into this explainer. Today we're unpacking a really fascinating piece of text from the Epistle of James, specifically chapter 3, verses 17 and 18. Now, you might usually read this as just a nice, simple list of virtues, but as we'll see, it's actually a masterful blueprint for our spiritual ecosystems. We're talking about the moral architecture of the renewed human person. If you've ever had to navigate complex relationships or, let's be real, toxic environments, this text offers an incredible look at the hidden origins of human behavior and how we can actually cultivate lasting peace.
To kick things off, I want to ask you a direct question. Think about this. What kind of wisdom is actually forming you? See, biblical wisdom is fundamentally an origin test, not an IQ score. It's all about moral and spiritual competence, not just raw intellect. James isn't simply describing your personality traits here. He's literally asking you to examine the spiritual source code that's currently operating inside of you.
And that brings us to section 1, two streams of wisdom. This is the fundamental conflict that governs how we interact.
Take a look at the stark contrast between these two patterns. On one hand, we have the earthly pattern. This is driven by self-advancement. It relies on pressure, on manipulation. In its ultimate social effect, fragmentation. It literally fractures communities. But then, look at the heavenly pattern. Its core motive is God's glory, its method is gentleness, and its social legacy is absolute cohesion. The text makes it incredibly clear. Earthly wisdom creates rivalry and disorder, while heavenly wisdom creates a foretaste of a restored creation. There is simply no neutral ground here.
To really wrap our heads around this, imagine two springs feeding two distinct rivers. If one spring is polluted right at its source, well, it really doesn't matter how much you try to clean the water downstream, right? The whole ecosystem is infected. But the other spring, it's pure, and life just naturally flourishes all along its banks. James is urging us to stop trying to just manage our behavior, which is the downstream water, and instead go back and examine the spring. He is targeting the core heart posture behind all of our conflicts.
So, how do we actually evaluate that spring? Let's move to section 2, the governing priority, focusing on the role of purity. James writes that the wisdom from above is first pure. And in the Greek structure, this is literally a mathematical priority. It uses the phrase proton men, which means first indeed. The Greek word for pure here is hagnos. Now, this isn't just about basic behavioral management. Hagnos means an undivided, completely undiluted allegiance to God. It means being the exact same person before God that you are behind closed doors and before people. The math dictates that purity absolutely must come first, because a divided heart, well, that will eventually destabilize any relationship.
Immediately following that purity is peaceable, or in Greek, irenagos. Now don't misunderstand this. This is not the passive avoidance of conflict. Not at all. Instead, it echoes the beautiful Hebrew concept of shalom. It's an active orientation toward wholeness, covenant harmony, and restored order. But here's the catch. True peace only flows from that initial purity. Scripture never, ever permits a peace that compromises holiness. Confusing mere niceness with actual holiness is a really subtle deception we have to watch out for.
This whole sequence connects deeply back to its Torah roots, specifically Psalm 24, which asks, "Who shall ascend the hill of the Lord? He who has clean hands and a pure heart." This language of ascent perfectly parallels James's concept of wisdom from above, and it proves a foundational rule for us. Vertical purity is always required before you can have horizontal peace. You simply cannot have structural, relational well-being in a community without first having an undivided allegiance to God.
Let's look at how this internal purity translates into a tangible relational atmosphere in section 3, the architecture of peace.
Check out this fascinating word, epiakis. We translate it as gentle. In classical Greek ethics, this described a ruler who refused to press the full weight of legal justice when mercy served a better purpose. It's defined as strength under voluntary restraint. Let that sink in for a second. Biblical gentleness is never a weak personality trait. It is immense, highly controlled strength that actively stabilizes chaotic environments. It's that rare ability to walk into a totally tense room and just not be pulled into the chaos.
And we see the ultimate, perfect embodiment of this in the cross. Colossians 1:20 tells us that Christ reconciled all things, making peace by the blood of his cross. You see, true peacemaking isn't passive avoidance. It is a costly, redemptive engagement. Christ didn't avoid tension just to keep a superficial fake peace. He went straight through the conflict to create ultimate reconciliation. To be a true peacemaker requires incredible courage. because you are actively absorbing tension without transmitting it back out.
And that perfectly sets up Section 4, the law of righteousness.
Let's map out how this ecosystem builds step by step. 1. It starts in heaven. 2. It descends to govern the heart. 3. That transforms our relationships. 4. Those relationships shape the community. And 5. That results in a righteous harvest. This is a strict ecological rule. If you disrupt this chain at the heart level, say with mixed motives, the entire harvest downstream just disappears. You cannot engineer this outcome through clever image management. It has to flow organically, right from the source.
This fruit we're talking about is sown in peace by those who make peace. The peacemaker's craft is fascinating. The Greek word here implies people who actively manufacture or craft peace. It's continuously sown. It's a daily habit, not just a one-time heroic act. The peacemaker steps into almost a priestly role. They engage redemptively, they absorb the tension, and they cultivate trust stemming from a sincere identity. They are habitual cultivators, out there preparing the relational soil so that righteousness can actually survive and grow.
Ultimately, all of this is aiming toward our final section, cultivating a kingdom climate.
Let's look at the psychological signatures of these two types of wisdom. When it comes to conflict, false wisdom produces chronic offense, while heavenly wisdom produces durable peace. Look at identity. False wisdom makes you competitive and insecure, but heavenly wisdom makes you secure and integrated. And posture? False wisdom leads to suspicion and reaction, whereas heavenly wisdom is trust-building and measured. I want you to test your own spiritual atmospheric signatures against these categories. What patterns follow you? Because as the text implies, our patterns preach. What kind of weather do you bring into a room? Which leads us to this profoundly formational insight, one that completely redefines how we view spiritual growth. Maturity is the decreasing frequency of relational rupture around you. Wow. We so often think maturity is just accumulating biblical knowledge or winning theological arguments, right? But James quietly, firmly corrects this. True maturity actually makes you a gravitational, stabilizing presence. It's not about isolating yourself to avoid people. It's that divine wisdom so governs your presence that people instinctively lower their defenses around you. Conflict literally loses its volatility when you're there.
To bring this all together, let's return to James 3:18. And the fruit of righteousness is sown in peace by those who make peace. The absolute biggest takeaway from this explainer is that wisdom isn't just a bulleted list of facts you memorize. It is the actual climate of peace you carry out into the world. It's that God-derived ordering of your inner life that naturally, inevitably produces relational wholeness wherever you happen to be planted.
So I want to leave you with one final lingering question to really chew on today. Based on the spiritual ecosystem you're actively cultivating right now, what harvest follows your presence? Take a hard look. Do you leave behind a wake of trust, stability, and righteousness, or is it something else entirely? Take some time this week to think about the climate you carry. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep cultivating that wisdom from above.